today there are multiple startups creating dairy proteins without cows. But back in 2014, Ryan Pandya and Perumal Gandhi were in a field of one, creating a completely new category in food. So what was it like in those early days, and how has the landscape changed since then? I'm delighted that I'm joined by Ryan today, who is going to be talking to me as part of our AgFunder 10th anniversary series to talk about some of the trials and tribulations of running a food tech company. So I'm going to attempt to bring him on my screen now.
Hello.
Hi, Ryan. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Thank you. Great. So I want to kind of go back to the genesis of Perfect Day. You graduated in 2013, and a year later, you've co-founded a startup looking to make milk without cows. So, how did you get there?
Again, my background is engineering, chemical and biological engineering. I was already primed to be thinking about it from more of a, milk isn't magic, cows aren't magic. This is all biology. This is all chemistry. Mm-hmm. There's something in milk. What is it? And, seconds later, you realize the protein in milk is really what's giving functionality and nutrition. So the obvious next question was, is there a way to make that protein without animals? And why not, right? I think at this point, it's clear that there's a way to make anything you want through biology. And I think today that's very clear. 10 years ago, maybe less so. But the idea was, why don't we use the same techniques that are used in the food industry already to make enzymes, to make amino acids, to make vitamin C, and apply that to a protein that, for whatever reason, no one has thought to use this kind of technology, this kind of approach to make. And that really was the genesis of the idea.
So was there really anything in the literature then? Because obviously, as you say, microbial fermentation is established to make a bunch of ingredients, even then including kind of some animal ingredients like insulin or chymosin and so on, used in cheese making. But was there much in the literature about producing whey protein or casein proteins at the time? Or
there really wasn't. No. And I think the main reason is that people didn't believe that the economics could be achieved, quite frankly. Yes. I think the kinds of yields and the kinds of output levels that you would need were not known to be possible. Like, I remember the first year or 2 years of the company, most of what we were doing, I feel like, was talking to experts in the field and asking them, what's the highest yield you've ever seen? What's possible here?
Yes.
And look, I mean, without going into too much specifics, we've now today achieved more than 5 times, probably 10 times what people thought was possible. Experts in the field thought was possible 10 years ago.
Because even today, you'll still get people saying, it's just not commercially viable to make particularly casein proteins, but even, people saying that about whey. I guess you would beg to differ.
I would beg to differ. Yeah. In fact, our entire business model is predicated on differing with that. I think the way that I think about it, that I think is, look, I mean, as a founder, I have to think in the most kind of long-term and abstract way. And the way that I look at this is, we're using the upstream technology of the enzyme industry, and we're using the downstream technology of the dairy industry, because the dairy industry already basically is purifying protein out of milk from the perspective of, if you're getting whey protein isolate, right? You're filtering and drying. So the sum of those two costs is the floor of our eventual cost, if that makes sense. And it's dramatically lower cost than dairy right now.
So over the years then, you've made those, people always talk about productivity, tighter and yield. You've made significant progress on all those fronts then in the last almost a decade.
Absolutely. And that's why we have companies approaching us to work with our technology and our platform. And quite frankly, that's why we've set up nthBio, to be able to leverage what we've built to do more than just our own pipeline. Because I think, I know we'll get into all of this, but I think the market and the conditions right now, but also in general, sort of demands, I think, focus and a well-defined kind of focus area for any given company, right? So for us, that means we've built this incredibly capable, very versatile platform, but there's only so many things that we're going to end up commercializing, because that's our focus.
Yes.
And yet we know that there are so many different companies that have started, that are younger than us, that are making maybe different proteins or targeting different things that would benefit from our platform.
Mm.
And so we found the best of both worlds to be able to do what we do and leverage what we've built for other companies.
So talk about focus then. So in terms of whether you're a B2B company, B2C, and so on. So when you started, I remember seeing pictures of you, holding up animal-free, a mock-up of an animal-free milk or something like that. And,
Yeah.
you always were looking at sort of consumer products, and then you kind of focused in on B2B, and then you set up this consumer products arm, the Urgent company, which now you're kind of sort of phasing out. So can you talk a bit about that journey? And a lot of startups obviously face this. Do you do B2B, B2C? Talk about your model, I guess.
Yeah, of course. When we started, to your point, I was right out of college. I didn't necessarily know very much about the industry of dairy or food or ingredients or biotech or really any of these things. So we had the assumption at the very beginning that we would build it like Impossible, for example. Like you build the technology, you make a product, you put the product on the market.
Yeah.
And very quickly, we started realizing that we were getting a lot of inbound inquiries from industry, from companies that were saying, hey, I buy whey protein, or I buy casein, or I buy milk ingredients. Can you sell it to me, right? Like I would love to have an animal-free version or a lactose-free version, or all the benefits that this protein brings to the world. Can you sell it to us? And as we started looking into it more, as we started hiring people from the dairy industry and from food ingredients, we realized, oh, this is actually how dairy works. Dairy is fundamentally about taking this raw input of milk and turning it into all these different things, not only the things that you and I might think of like cheese, yogurt, ice cream, but actually fractionating it into the different components and turning those into ingredient markets. That's what dairy is. And we had then, and we have now, the ability to make each of these things already in their sort of pure form without any of the other, in some ways, impurities, right? For example, if you want a lactose-free milk protein, you can't really get all the way lactose-free. There's always going to be a little bit. But if you're making it through fermentation, you can actually accomplish that. So we quickly realized that B2B was actually not only the way to check all these boxes with the demand that we were seeing, but a way stronger business model and a way more flexible approach, because brands come and go, trends come and go, but the fundamental ingredients that drive food innovation within food companies is limited by what ingredients are available to them. So why would we want to be the only company out there doing it? We should really enable everyone else in the food industry to use these ingredients. So in 2016, we decided to shift formally to a B2B model. Now, what changed is over the following 4 years, we started to build our technology more. We were starting to talk to food companies, and we realized these are large companies that move kind of slowly. And we kind of wanted to show them, by the time we were ready in 2019, 2020, you might know in 2019, we ended up doing a kind of soft launch.
Ice cream products.
Yeah. We did 10,000 ice creams and a little truck in LA and stuff. But we wanted to actually go a little bit further. And what really happened is we met with a distributor in California who tried our ice cream in an unmarked white pint, and they loved it. It's an incredible product, and they loved it. And they were like, I couldn't tell that this isn't dairy, like cow-based ice cream. Can we start distributing this for you? And we're like, well, we're B2B. We don't actually sell this yet, but we would be happy to connect you with our customers, right? And they go, just give it to us. Like, it doesn't matter. Call it whatever you want. Just put a name on it. Give it to us. We'll distribute it throughout California. We'll get it going. And we're driving home from that meeting, and we're like, why don't we do that, right? Why don't we just give it a name, push it out there? Because we could move so much faster than any of our customers by virtue of being a startup, by virtue of being, intimately familiar with this ingredient. We already had the formulation, we had the recipe down, we had the, commands, all of it figured out. So we did. And from there, we started thinking about it a little bit differently. We're like, why don't we turn this into its own entity and actually try to prove not only that you can make products that were ready, that the ingredients ready, but that you can actually build a good business out of this. And what we were really hoping to do was prove to the the big companies that really drive impact, that this was ready for prime time. What I think we maybe didn't anticipate when we started it was how we would feel when that box was checked. So
you created the Brave Robot brand, some other brands, and then you also acquired the Coolhaus brand.
That's right.
As well. And then more recently, you're sort of moving back to a B2B model. I mean, to people that say, did it make sense to buy Coolhaus only to sell it again? How do you respond to those questions?
Yeah. So I think what I was about to get to as well is what we were trying to do was show this model of, fermentation derived dairy and fermentation derived protein is fully ready to go into stores, to go into consumers, and people are ready for it. Now, Coolhaus is a little bit different. I'll get to that in a second. But overall, we accomplished the mission to such an extent that we didn't feel the need to run consumer brands anymore, quite frankly, because we started having pretty much every Fortune 500 food and beverage and dairy company working with our ingredients, launching things. Now, typically they've launched kind of small things to start, but I think, and I know we'll get into that as well, but what we know behind the scenes and what I can't kind of share too much more detail on is that these are all leading towards much, much larger launches and much, much larger kind of parts of their portfolios. And so we don't have to do this consumer brand thing anymore to the same extent. And as we think about, our resources, our focus, why would we dilute our focus if we don't need to, or if it's not driving sort of goals, right? Now, Coolhaus is interesting because what we wanted to show there was, can you take a brand that has been operating for a decade and has been selling traditional dairy? They also had some plant-based products, but you had kind of both paradigms, right? A small plant-based part of the pie and a majority that's dairy. And the question was, can you take an established brand with an established audience and turn it over to animal free? How does that go? Because that's what we really want our customers to be doing, and what I think will really drive the impact that we're motivated by and that our customers are motivated by. It's one thing to launch a product from scratch that's in the animal free category and see how that does, but that's not what we want. That's not even what the large companies want. We all want to see the supply chain that drives the large part of the pie move into a more sustainable paradigm. We did that with Coolhaus. And I think that was a really useful data point for us and for the industry. But again, now that it has kind of proven its point, we're shifting into being able to do that with customers that have dramatically more scale and impact than we could ever build from scratch. Just is the reality of how long it takes to build things, and it's not. Let me put it this way: it's not our goal to try to build things that chip away at other people's market. That's not the goal here. We actually want the players that are in the market to continue being in the market, and we want to help them, right, reduce their impact and achieve their ESG goals and kind of get to that future.
So those big players who are expressing an interest in your ingredients, what is actually driving them? What is motivating them? Is it that they want to create a new third category of animal-free dairy, or is it more about them incorporating your ingredients into their formulations, reducing their environmental impact? What is actually driving them and ultimately this market?
Yeah, so it's both and more. So there's one piece of it is there's a growing demographic that wants, whether it's animal free, whether it's vegan, whether it's lactose free, whether it's sustainable, right? There are so many different kind of angles on, I want this product. I want the experience of a good ice cream or a creamy cream cheese or all the things that dairy brings without the baggage of sort of being produced with animals. Now, I think it's a fast growing demographic and category, but it's not the majority. Everyone knows that. The reality is the majority is still buying dairy, is still buying animal products. And the question is, how can we we being Perfect Day and the industry at large and these customers, how can we reduce the impact that large majority of the pie represents? So on the one hand, you have the animal free or that category. You also have the massive ESG benefit of being able to actually reduce the impact of dairy, which for many companies, the dairy is the ESG. Like when we talk to Starbucks, I don't know if you know, they're the largest dairy buyer in the country, in the United States. And when they set their ESG goals, they're looking at dairy because that is the biggest lever to drive their ESG impact. Right. And that's true for pretty much any company that's buying dairy. Now, the other things are there are functionalities and product, abilities that you can do with products that are kind of possible today with dairy, but are really possible when you start to make it through fermentation. So the level of purity that we can achieve is higher than you can get with dairy. The level of sort of functional flexibility. So like, let me give you an example. Right now, if you want to have a high protein beverage that is like a recovery drink right after a workout, maybe you've had some of these. There are these like high protein waters that are pretty much always really, really acidic, and they have a little bit of a cheesy flavor. This is just one example.
Yeah.
Our protein is able to do this at a neutral pH, meaning it's not acidic. It doesn't have to be like a lemon lime or whatever kind of flavor. You could have, and we've made this, like a coconut water or like a really mild flavored but super high protein drink. Now, I don't know the size of that market, but it's there. And what's interesting about it is that you couldn't do this with whey protein from dairy. You have to do it through fermentation to be able to make that product. And there are numerous other kinds of things like this that are unlocked by being able to do this. So the three kind of answers are, there's a small part of the pie, there's the majority of the pie that drives ESG, and then there's new functionalities and quite frankly, more I think predictable pricing than you can get with the animal supply chain as well.
So I want to talk about funding. So you've been doing this for almost a decade. Can you talk a bit about investor attitudes, how they have evolved over the years you've been doing this, and what the situation is like now, given that there's been a drop off in funding, not just for food tech, but across the board, really, in the last kind of 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I think the venture market itself has matured a little bit. We were all excited about Uber, Airbnb, whatever, right? Pick your unicorn of the 2010s. I think the reality has hit the entire venture world that these are supposed to be businesses, right? Like we're not building a speculative asset that you pump and dump. We're building robust, sustainable, surviving, lasting businesses. And I think we're lucky at Perfect Day that we've kind of always had that focus and we've always had that intent to turn this into, of course, you start somewhere. We literally had nothing when we started in 2014. It was all venture-based. And the goal has been from day one to turn that into self-sustainability and profitability. And I think the venture market has just kind of woken up to that reality. And so we're lucky that we're already on that trajectory. And so being able to show that and being able to tell that story is extremely important now. And again, I think we consider ourselves lucky that we're on that.
I mean, you're already at the Series D stage. I mean, what happens next?
Well, E.
But I mean, can you carry on just kind of raising more money? I mean, what's the end game?
No, and I think that's the point, right? Like we really want to get off the need for venture, which I think is a healthy mindset, right? And if any venture investor would say, ideally, you get off the treadmill at some point. And so the way that we've always viewed it is that we're trying to build a company that could exist as a really strong public company. And the rationale there is whether the end game, and I think, for startups in general, whether the end game is public or whether the end game is an acquisition, you're best served by building a great business, right? Because it's better for an acquiring company, it's better if you're public, it's better for shareholders. that's what we're trying to do. And of course, we're not quite there yet, so we will probably end up raising, and we'll talk to you about it when we do our next round. But we're very close to that sort of finish line that I think is the goal for any startup.
So, I mean, how should the market interpret the recent layoffs at your company?
What I think we've done really well is hire incredible people and really, really smart, talented folks to help us build what we've built. When you're in an environment that's grow, build, it's different than when the market agrees that, hey, let's make sure that there's focus and there's all these sort of efficiencies, right? So I think it unfortunately kind of comes with the territory. And to your point, it's something that's happening across the board. We would have loved to be the exception to that, but I think the reality is, like, we're also a boat in the ocean, right?
So I want to talk just briefly about how do you talk to consumers about what you're doing. I know we've discussed this over the years. Do we talk about microflora? Do we talk about animal-free dairy? Do we talk about whey protein from fermentation? Can you talk a bit about briefly how that's kind of evolved and what you think is the best way to communicate this to consumers?
Yeah, so we started off describing it as animal-free. And, again, for that sort of smaller part of the pie, I think that's correct and it's right. And a lot of people really want that. But the reality is the overall impact that could be achieved here isn't necessarily in products that are entirely animal-free. And I think that was a huge learning for us. That, again, like when we went from assuming we'd be a consumer brand to B2B in 2016, realizing that companies wanted to use this ingredient not necessarily in entirely animal-free products, but to start to move their portfolio or their product lines in the direction, right?
To reduce their reliance on animal-derived.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about that is it's a sliding scale, because like positive impact and positive environmental benefits and these kinds of things don't have to be all or nothing. And in fact, it doesn't help anyone for us to expect it to be all or nothing, right? These are incremental. Society is incrementally getting better, and we want to help that and push that. So instead, what we have found is if we talk about it as what it is, which is whey protein from fermentation, it accomplishes two things. First of all, it gives us that flexibility and our customers that flexibility. And secondly, it plays up what I think people already have familiarity with. People know what whey protein is. It's the gold standard, highest quality nutrition out there right now and functionality out there. And fermentation is known to be, a really nice technology that converts things into more complex or more nutritious forms, right? Broadly. And so combining those two concepts, you get, I think, a really accurate depiction of what this is, which is important on a label, and that flexibility.
Okay, so I want to talk about mistakes, lessons, learnings, and all that stuff. This is a kind of a looking back over the last few years. You've been doing this for almost a decade. If you had your time over again, what would you have done differently?
I think with hindsight, what we would have done differently is focus on our technology platform services earlier. We kind of almost stumbled into it. This is going to be a recurring motif. It's that as we talked to other companies in the space, we started seeing that there was demand for accessing our platform and our technology and our strains. And now that we've seen that demand, we've started to apply our platform in a more kind of focused way to be able to help other companies to do what we've done with less need for the level of funding, the level of effort and time that we had to put in to do it. Now that we know, wouldn't it be great if we had kind of started off with that goal? I think in the spirit of answering the question, I think that's the thing that I wish we would have done. But to be completely honest, I don't have any regrets that we didn't do it that way, because this is how it works. This is, like, the world changes, the company evolves, you evolve as a leader and as a founder. And I think we did the right things at the right times. I feel the same way about having built a consumer business and then realizing that it doesn't have to be our focus, and it maybe isn't the best use of our resources.
So I just want to end with this sort of stepping back and looking at the broader precision fermentation space. You were talking about helping other companies address the challenges that you face. What are those challenges? Is it about skills shortages? Is it about strain development? Is it about just the lack of available capacity? What are those kind of choke points that you are hoping to help the industry solve?
Yeah, so currently the main barrier is the actual strain engineering, and that's what we're helping our clients address and what we're addressing. Moving forward, like in the next 5 years, let's say, I think the actual choke point will be CapEx and infrastructure. So you can view it as we're at the point where we are one company that has sort of proven that this technology is applicable to this type of, or cost structure, type of ingredient, whatever you want to call it. Many more are following in our footsteps, and we hope to kind of help them with our platform. The reality is going to be, this is like solar or wind energy. Like the unit economics might be proven, but now the CapEx needs to be deployed to actually build this infrastructure. And so this is a known challenge for the industry. The ability for fermentation to scale as a supply chain or as a collection of supply chains is going to be limited by how much we can deploy infrastructure, capital to be able to build these plants. And this is such a focus area that like entire geographies and governments are focused on it. Like you probably know this, the Biden administration is incredibly focused on this.
Yes.
We've had numerous meetings with the White House, OSTP, right? And the Biden administration to try to address this challenge. And I think as we move into the 2020s more fully, that's going to be the focus area, because the 2030, 2050 goals that everyone in the world is setting are going to rely on being able to actually make the volumes that drive impact.
Fair enough. Well, that's a positive note to end on. Thank you so much for giving up your time for me today, and congratulations on your progress so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.